Hey everyone, welcome to day three, module three. It's fantastic to be with you now, and we're in that third part of our 5 days of focus. And this is an exciting time because this is when we shift the emphasis into recovery and reconnection. The first two modules were very much about understanding our current state and perhaps the journey we've been on to end up in a state of burnout. And so I'm excited as we move into module three, day three, half full or half empty. I'm excited to start to move into painting a picture of what being on the other side of burnout, being reconnected and energized might be like. In this module, we're going to explore this idea of a benevolent universe. In other words, believing that the universe is actually abundant and caring. And this is a really interesting one, and certainly personally quite a challenging one in my own recovery journey. In the in focus part of this session, we're going to unpack how we understand this and explore our human nature and indeed so many things that are quite common in our ways of interacting in the world that make this actually quite hard, as well as unpack some practical tools and strategies we can use to move from not having faith or trust in the universe towards really having a sense of faith and trust that the universe is indeed abundant and caring towards us. So without further ado, let's get into it. So let's get into this in focus learning piece. I want to begin with addressing the issue of why does this even matter in the first place? For some people, this sounds very esoteric and wishy-washy. Do I trust the universe? Do I not trust the universe? And that's really where we kick off, you see, because it is normal not to trust the universe. Nature and nurture mean that we trust our own instincts for survival and our own efforts and talents to save the day. We don't rely on the universe as such. That means that any misfortune we have, we interpret as a consequences of our own actions. I should have done better. I should have tried harder. And we don't leave any room for random events or luck, which means we become over responsible overachievers. I know I can relate to that. And the negative side of that, we can be overly self-blaming and hypercritical. And again, we've covered some of the consequences of that with emotional suppression and risks of burnout. So, not trusting the universe, this is actually really important and certainly something that we need to address if we're going to go on into a full state of recovery and reconnection. Now, in the book, of course, there's this profound question, or profound for me anyway, which is, do you feel in your gut, as opposed to your head, that the universe is abundant and caring or scarce and uncaring? Now, when that question, if you've read the chapter, you'll know that that was a really perplexing question for me in the midst of my own burnout. Because as a clinical psychologist, I obviously knew what the right answer was, that, oh, of course. But deep down in my gut, well, that was a whole nother story. And when I was in the midst of some of the worst parts of my burnout journey, I did not feel like the universe was abundant and caring. Quite the opposite. I felt exhausted. I felt let down by people around me, and I felt like I was the victim of a cruel world. And I felt that way despite all my training and despite part of me knowing better. And I think that's really important as you're going through this course for you to pause on things like this too and simply reflect. Move beyond your impulse or your reactive thinking about this or what the right answer might be, and look deep down inside and really think about in your gut, well, how do you feel about the universe? I think that's quite important. And many, many high functioning executives I've worked with, well, they just do what I did. They can kind of jump over this without actually getting in touch with what's going on. And when we get in touch with what's going on, well, the metaphor of the cup is the cup half full or half empty. Well, that actually becomes a really concrete way for us to explore what might be going on beneath the surface during our burnout. And so, if I don't necessarily feel this deep abundance and caring in the universe, clearly I'm in the half empty camp. If, on the other hand, I feel really attached and in love and excited about all the good things coming my way, I'm probably in the half full camp. Now, it's kind of obvious that we use half empty, half full in so many different ways in our society. But as someone recovering from burnout, you're in this program right now. I want us to consider that seeing the glass as half empty is both normal and unhealthy, but normal. And I want us to consider, and I'm going to unpack the science of this for us, that seeing the glass as half full is abnormal and healthy. So here's the conundrum for us, the dilemma. The normal thing to do happens to be the unhealthy thing to do. And if I'm supposed to recover from all of this, I've got to do something abnormal. And that's obviously not going to be easy. And the thing that's really important here, particularly when my clients are struggling with this one, is they often, when they're in that state of burnout, they think, oh, prior to this time, I was always seeing the glass as half full. That's very unlikely. Okay, it's possible, it's very unlikely because seeing the glass as half empty is our normal default state for all of us. All of us are wired that way. And I just want us to be really clear on that. So let's have a quick look at this now. Why is it normal to see the glass as half empty? Well, we're born with this negativity bias or survival instinct, all of us. And so we're always looking out for threat and risk and ways to self-protect. Okay, so that's just genetic, that's before we have the language and the memory. We're already in the negativity bias. And then we grow up in a world, and most of us have grown up in some form of Western society, which is merit-based or a meritocracy, simply meaning that we spend time and effort trying to self-improve and being meritorious. The more effort we put into life, the more success we're supposed to achieve. And that's different to a communal society where it's expected that there's a certain level of provision regardless of how much effort you put in. And so, following this line of logic, then we're going to be interpreting things once we've got memory and language and we're getting on with our lives. Well, we're going to be looking for threats to survive, and we're going to be putting more and more effort in to try to be better people. Then, when things go wrong for us, it's only natural that we'd say, wow, I've done something wrong here. I could have done better. It's my fault. So this is before you've had burnout. This is just the natural wiring. And so, yes, being overly responsible or self-blaming and hypercritical, hey, that's actually, we're wired that way, particularly if we've grown up in a normal Western world. And now as we've discussed in our previous module on day 2, we're not going to feel a sense of belonging and connection. And we're definitely going to emotionally suppress a lot more. That's the unhealthy side. So normal and unhealthy. And that means that despite whatever veneer we put on things, a lot of us are operating in survival mode. We are effort reward, merit-based people, and we're critical of ourselves or critical of other people when they fail. We assume they've done something wrong. We don't just assume that they're subject to a random event or unlucky. It's always about them. And all of that is really unhealthy, but it's also really normal. And all of this existed before you burnt out. So I would say part of our recovery and reconnection journey is about accepting perhaps our normal state before burnout as well, particularly as we move through this module and we start to look at how we can change things. So clearly this type of person, who's a normal person, doesn't trust the universe, going back to what we're focused on. So let's talk about half full. We praise half full in this world. We go on about positivity and having a great attitude. And indeed, it's a healthy thing, as we can see on the screen, but it's also abnormal. It's abnormal. Okay, let's do this. overriding your survival instincts and negativity bias, well, that's abnormal. And that's a really hard thing to do, seeing opportunity instead of threat. It's doable, but it's actually quite hard to do. Having to let go of a merit-based worldview and accept that no matter how hard I work, sometimes random events, luck, being unlucky, well, that's actually very hard, particularly in a Western world, you see, because if I accept that, I lower my sense of self-control and autonomy. And that is very taxing for people, unless they've done the work, unless they've done the work. And this is the biggest one of all I want to focus on in our in focus session about this today. To see the glass as half full, we actually have to separate out the actions of others with the physical world that we live in. And we go into this in the book. And this is very hard to do. And it's very hard to do because as we grow up and we shape our identities in the world, how other people treat us is kind of merged with how we see the environment, the physical environment. They become kind of like one and the same thing. And they're not one and the same thing, but by the time we're in our ages and we're dealing with our lives, we can't really separate them very easily. And that's because, as the famous quote from Anais Nin, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. And we are people who, over the years, have formed up worldviews based on meshing together the behavior of others and the physical world. And that's a very hard thing that we have to address if we're going to embrace this idea of trusting the universe. Obviously, anyone who does trust the universe to be abundant and caring, well, the features of their disposition, their perspective, well, they look for opportunity. They pay attention to feeling a sense of connection. They prepare for opportunity and they accept the role that luck plays. And so those are the hallmarks of someone who does trust the universe. So here we are, the normal, unhealthy version of this, half empty, not trusting the universe. The incredibly healthy but nonetheless abnormal experience of actually half full, trusting the universe. So, how do we get from one state to the other? How do we recover, reconnect? How do we move on in our lives? That's the question. How do we go from what is normal and unhealthy to what is abnormal and healthy? It's clearly not an easy task. And so, I want to share with you this strategy, this tool. We call it the upward arrow. And it's a practical thing that you can do in your own time when you're ready, and it will help you shift, get in touch with, and then shift the level of trust you feel in the universe. So let's unpack it. On page 32 of the book, we talk about the downward arrow, which is a well-established tool in psychology that all psychologists know about. And there's heaps you can research about the use of a downward arrow. And I introduce a variation on that, a new idea that I call the upward arrow. And both these things are really good at changing our belief systems. But the point of the downward arrow is it's a beautiful inquiry process, asking ourselves to go a bit deeper into things, what's really going on. And the downward arrow helps us change unhelpful beliefs about ourselves and about other people. It's really good for that. There's nothing better, in my opinion. The problem is the downward arrow was never designed to shift us towards trusting the universe, feeling like the universe is abundant and caring. That's not what this tool was for. But we can tweak it. And before you know it, we can use a very similar idea called the upward arrow. And this process actually helps us embrace a more positive belief and trust in the universe. So I want to step through this one with us now so we can really get it and we can start to think about things going on in our lives using the upward arrow. So, in the example one, we have this activating event or the thing that kicks off my upsetness and my burnout and my stress is I was going after this job and I went to the final interview and I researched the company. I did everything right. And then I got told I didn't get the job, and I was devastated. I was flat. The upward arrow, the first thing that would happen there is we get in touch with, well, okay, what's going on in your head right now, Pete, about that? And I'd say, oh, I gave it my all and failed. I'll never succeed at getting a job. Oh, if I, after all of this, if I don't get it over the line now, when is it? I'll never succeed. We go, okay, okay. Now, one of the things you're working on, Pete, is this idea of embracing an abundant universe. So let me ask you this prompt question. So, sure enough, that's how you're thinking right now. But what if the universe is abundant and cares for you? Well, what does this whole situation mean? And there I am going, I don't know, it doesn't feel very caring or abundant. I just lost the job. Okay, I'll stay with it. Well, the only thing I can think of, if the universe cares for me and then I didn't get this job, well, I guess it means that there must be a better job. There must be something else coming. I guess it means that this wasn't meant for me. Yeah, well, maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. Maybe that's true. But you need to think about that. Is that a more helpful way to see this right now? Is it possible there are other jobs on the face of the earth that you might be good at? Is it possible that there's an even better one that just hasn't come around yet? And of course, we all know that that's possible. It's not a certainty, but it's possible. But we're not done yet, because if I'm the person doing the exercise, I'm still not feeling that great about what happened. So we push that idea again. We say, all right, well, Pete, thank you for at least acknowledging maybe there's something better coming for you. That maybe for reasons we don't understand, this wasn't for you. I just want to ask you one more time, again. And if the universe really is abundant and cares for you, then what does it now mean as you keep thinking this through? And so I sit in this space working off the last thought I had, well, maybe there's something better. And I, wrestling with it, go, okay, well, if it's true that the universe does care for me, well, then I guess it means that I need to be open to what's next. I really do. I don't feel that way right now, but that's where I need to go. And I actually, again, I don't feel it right now, but I need to be grateful that I didn't end up in a job that wasn't for me. And I might have to sit down with that and take a breath, just like I'm doing right now. That might be a tough one. But even the fact that I'm thinking that way now creates a consequence called right fit. And what that means is instead of self-blaming and practicing interviewing another 1,000 times next time and giving myself a really hard time about my lack of success, these specific questions and this process we've just gone through has kind of forced my brain into a different way of coping with things. It's forcing me to consider how to be optimistic, to consider how to be open for what might be next. And that doesn't lower my self-confidence. That doesn't increase my stress levels any further. And most importantly, this module, it actually allows me to create the emotional space in my mind and body to accept that maybe something good is coming, to accept that maybe something good is coming. And again, when we're burnt out, that we don't often have the emotional space to do that. So the upward arrow starts to allow us to have that space. Sometimes when I'm doing the upward arrow with people, they're kind of smiling along, and you can see the wrestle with it, and I feel it too when I'm doing it on myself. And we'll talk about that in the in practice session a little bit more. But sometimes people say to me, "Well, Pete, there's no guarantee that tomorrow the amazing job's just going to land on my desk. There's no guarantee that I'm going to win lotto. There's no guarantee that all these things you're asking my brain to consider in a positive way about the world, there's no guarantee they're going to happen." And I'd say to them, you are right. There's no guarantee. But have you ever stopped to consider that there's no guarantee that all the negative things you would have otherwise been thinking are going to happen? You see, all we have is the ability to live in the present moment. And in the present moment, we actually do not know what is going to happen next. We're simply guessing. So when we're worrying about things, negativity bias, threat, merit, all the things we've done here, we're naturally wired to be thinking negative into the future. What could go wrong? How do I prepare? But we don't know that that's going to happen. And so I say to my clients, hey, having a negative or risk view of the world is no more valid than having an optimistic faith in the world because we live now and we don't know what's happening next. And so you're right to say, hey, this whole optimistic faith in the universe thing, I don't know that to be true, but I want you to equally, when you get in the trap, the old trap of worrying about all the doom into the future, I want you to say, hey, all this doom, well, I live in the moment now, so I don't know that's true either. And at the end of the day, you see, when we're recovering and reconnecting and moving on with our lives, we ultimately take a step of faith. We take a step of faith to remain optimistic about the future, which is particularly what we're focused on in this module. Or we adopt that, I guess, inverted faith. We take a step of distrust and worry into the future. But they're both, they have the same reliability, but one of them is way better for our mental health than the other one, but neither is more valid. And that's often the clincher if you're someone who's very analytical, when you can hear that neither is more valid, but one of them is more healthy than the other. Sometimes that gets you over the line. So the upward arrow is such a powerful tool, but I want to end our in focus learning session about half full or half empty by adding just another layer, another lens on this issue. And that is for us to consider in our faith or relationship with the universe the extent to which we simply commit to stuff in life or the extent to which we feel actual connection with things in life. And again, a really helpful signpost on my burnout recovery journey was this quote: you can be committed to something without necessarily feeling connected. And the first time I heard that, I'm like, oh my goodness, boy, do I feel committed to things, obligated, I must do. And oh my goodness, I'm so disconnected from all of this. You see, because when you're not feeling connected, when you don't feel connected at all, well, you're out of alignment with the universe, to use the language in this module. And so everything you're doing is feeling exhausting and frustrating. But see, when you feel a sense of connection to what you have to do, well, you're in alignment with the universe. And so everything feels energizing and purposeful. And again, I want to honor the work of Corey Muscara with this stuff. It's so important, you see, because sometimes, if you're anything like me, when you're at your worst with your burnout, it's because you're in a state of being overcommitted to things and under-connected to them. Overcommitted to things and under-connected to them. And I want you to think about that for a moment. Think about where you feel pressure or obligation. Again, in our last module, we talked about being motivated or driven. When you're driven, you're overcommitted. You're compelled. And that's exhausting and frustrating. But if you can change that around to become motivated, to become connected, to actually pause and think about things that energize you, we'll be doing an activity about this shortly, versus things that make you anxious, so both forms of energy, energized or anxious energy, you can actually change and be